All the Young Dudes, Sirius's Perspective by ROLLERCOASTERWORDS. Chapter 6, First Year, Revenge. Regulus didn't write him back. Sirius waited all week for a letter, but nothing came. Worse than that, his owl never returned. After a few days, he broke down and asked Narcissa, who smirked and told him it had been confiscated. Sirius tried not to worry, but it felt like there was a stone at the pit of his stomach. More and more often, he found his thoughts wandering back to Reg, wondering how his brother was doing. The solution, of course, was to keep his mind occupied at all times with other things. He made bets with James about who could finish the homework first. He played chess with Peter over and over again, until he finally won. He watched Remus, who finally began to spend time with them, trying to puzzle out the odd boy's secrets. On Sunday evenings, Sirius's distraction of choice was their transfiguration essay from McGonagall, 14 inches of parchment. James and Sirius raced to see who could finish theirs first, while Peter tried desperately to keep up. Remus just relaxed into the plush armchairs of the Gryffindor common room, watching them as though he couldn't be bothered with something as silly as homework. "So," James said, setting down his quill, "how are we going to get them back?" "Get who back?" Peter asked. He was searching through his notes, looking through a page that he accidentally elbowed onto the floor without realizing. Sirius sighed and ducked under the table. "The Slytherins!" James hissed. "Keep up, Pete." Peter whispered back, sounding worried. "Not all the Slytherins! Only Snape and Mortimer, right?" Under the desk, Sirius rolled his eyes. "All of them," he said firmly, sitting back up and presenting the piece of parchment. "This is what you're looking for?" "Thanks." Peter grabbed it, relieved. "I've nearly finished." "Have you done it, Lupin?" Sirius asked casually, looking over. Remus had left his book open on the table, but he hadn't glanced at it once. In fact, over the course of the week, Sirius had noticed that Remus never seemed to look at his books. Everyone else seemed to have forgotten Mortimer's comment about reading, but Sirius hadn't. "Nah," Remus shrugged, nonchalant. "Can't be bothered." Sirius frowned. "It couldn't be true, could it? Let us know if you need help." "You can copy mine if you want," James said helpfully, pushing his essay across the desk. Sirius watched as Remus attempted to stifle his irritation. His jaw clenched and his brow furrowed slightly. "I'm fine. I'm not stupid." "No one said you were," James replied, acting as if he didn't hear the bite in Remus's tone. Sirius continued to study Remus's expression. His entire face had clouded over. On the armrest of the chair, his fist clenched. Sirius remembered how he had thrown himself across the potion table to punch Snape. When Sirius looked back up, their eyes met. Remus released a short breath, unclenching his fist, and said, "We could put itching powder in their beds." He seemed eager to change the subject. "Or on their clothes. If we could figure out who does the laundry, anyway." "Figure out who does the laundry?" Sirius blinked. Did Remus not know about the house elves? Before he could ask, James responded, chewing on his quill thoughtfully as he said, "I like it." A pause, then, "Anyone got any itching powder, though?" All three of them shook their heads. "Could order some from Zonko's," Sirius suggested. "If you let me borrow your owl, James. Mum confiscated mine after the sorting." His heart sped up when he said it. He wasn't sure why he felt like he was admitting something. The whole school knew that he was a family disappointment by now. "I suppose," James replied. "I wish we could get it sooner, though. You know, strike while the iron is hot." "Don't need to buy any itching powder," Remus said suddenly, sitting up straight in his chair. "Do you reckon they have rose hips in the greenhouse?" "Yep," Peter replied, still scribbling away on the parchment. "For healing potions. Arthritis, I think." "The hairs inside make you itch really badly," Remus explained, speaking faster. There was a spark of excitement in his eyes. "Matron, the woman who runs the children's home, she grows them. If you get in trouble, she makes you seed them without gloves on." "That's awful." James frowned. "Good idea, though," Sirius grinned. "Next break, we'll go and get a load of them. Then we can seed them, with gloves on, and put them in the Slytherins' bedsheets." "Excellent!" "How are we going to get into the Slytherin dorms?" Peter asked, finally setting down his quill. James leaned back, smirking. Leave that to me. They sent Peter to go and collect the rose hips, since he was the only one of them who hasn't done anything cool enough to get detention, which meant he wasn't on any of the professor's radars as a troublemaker. Sirius didn't have the most faith in Peter when it came to troublemaking, but it turned out that he was decent at sneaking around. When he returned unnoticed from the greenhouse after morning break with a jar full of rosehip seeds, even Sirius clapped him on the back. After that, it was just a matter of seeding all the buds. They locked themselves away in their shared bathroom, following Remus's instructions to wear heavy dragonhide gloves and avoid any direct contact with the seeds or the fine hairs. Sirius sat next to James on the floor, working in tandem. I can't wait to see the looks on their faces, he said, grinning as they worked. James's head was bowed right next to his, and he looked up and grinned back, sharing in the excitement. Sirius continued, saying, I still don't know how we're going to get into the Slytherin dorms. Even Peter isn't that sneaky. He shot a meaningful look at James, who had refused, despite all of Sirius's best efforts, to reveal his master plan for breaking into the Slytherin common room. Let me worry about that, James said, and Sirius rolled his eyes in exasperation. Secrets were only fun when he was in on them. They stored the seeds and hairs in an extra jar, eating the leftover rose hips over the course of the week to ensure that they had no evidence left behind. The chance came on Tuesday evening. It was James who suggested they should do it before everyone went to bed, and that they split up to avoid suspicion. Sirius felt dizzy with excitement during dinner, rushing to finish his food. Remus was helping himself to seconds, and Pete, although done, looked sick with nerves. So Sirius was the first to stand, strolling casually out of the hall. As he left, he thought to himself that if Peter ruined it for all of them by panicking and giving something away, Sirius would curse the boy himself. James was next to leave, following at a discreet distance. They made their way to the girls' loo on the second floor. According to Remus, there was a secret passageway that led to the dungeons. Inside, Sirius could hear a girl crying in one of the stalls. Remus had warned them about that. Apparently nobody used this lavatory because of the gloomy ghost that haunted it. Sirius left her alone, pacing in front of the door as he waited for the others to arrive. Well, someone's eager, James said mildly as he shut the door behind him. Sirius grinned. Do you reckon we'll have to wait for Pete to hurl when he gets here? He looks a bit peaky back there. Nah, come on. Pete's a good sport. James smiled, but it was a bit strained. He didn't like it when Sirius made jabs at Peter. It always made things uncomfortable, so Sirius wasn't sure why he still did it. Sometimes the words just slipped out. He wasn't good at holding his tongue when he was annoyed, or excited, or angry, well, he wasn't good at it, ever, really. Once Peter and Remus arrived, James made a grand, sweeping gesture with his arm. Lead the way, Lupin. Sirius grabbed his arm, stopping him with a meaningful look. Wait, show us what you're planning first. James smirked, that infuriatingly secret, self-satisfied grin that he'd been sporting since Sunday. Oh, okay then. Here, hold this. He thrust the jar of rosehip seeds into Sirius's hands, pulling back his robes. Sirius almost gasped as James started to pull the shimmery, silvery material out into the open. His mouth dropped open. No, he breathed. You haven't! Potter, you bloody haven't! James was wearing a shit-eating grin. He looked very pleased with himself. He winked at them. Then, with a flourish, he swept the cloak over his head, so it covered him from top to toe. He vanished. You jammy bastard! Sirius whooped. How come you never told me? The excitement in his voice mostly covered the sting of irritation underlying the words. You never told me either, Peter squeaked. And I've known you forever. Where did you get it? Sirius stifled the hot flash of annoyance at Peter's tone, which he was sure was directed at him. It did make him feel slightly better, though, that while James had kept the secret from Peter for 11 years, he'd only kept it from Sirius for a few weeks. It's been in the family for years, James said triumphantly, pulling the cloak down to reveal his head. Dad let me bring it, as long as I don't tell Mum. Lucky git. Sirius said, reaching out to rub some of the invisible material in his fingers. It felt silky, luxurious, yet light as air. My parents would do anything for an invisibility cloak. I wish Reg was here to see this. I reckon we can all fit under it, James demonstrated, pulling it apart and raising up his arms like a bat. Come on, let's all get nice and cozy. It was a bit awkward, shuffling underneath the cloak together, and they had to waddle around the room a few times to make sure they could actually get about. Finally, trying not to giggle or whisper too much, the 4 invisible boys made their way to the third stool from the left. Remus directed them, showing which of the towers to tap to open the floor and reveal the passageway. How did you find this, Remus? James whispered. It's genius. You come out behind one of them rugs they hang on the walls in the dungeons, Remus replied. I just looked behind it. Do you mean a tapestry? Peter asked. Could he be so dense? Sirius had known upon first seeing him on the train that Remus came from a different background. The hand-me-down clothes, the shabby used books, the black eye. It became more apparent as he started to spend more time with them. Incidents like this, where Remus was slightly out of sync, missing words, or unfamiliar with references the others made, happened fairly frequently. Sirius wasn't sure how much of it was being raised by muggles, or how much of it was, being what the black family would call low class. Next to him, Remus stiffened at Peter's question, muttering, suppose so. Obviously, they all knew that Remus meant a tapestry. Peter didn't have to point it out like that. Shut up, Pettigrew, Sirius huffed, kicking Peter's ankle. Oi! Remus hissed, kicking back at Sirius with much more force. Bugger off! A sharp flash of pain shot up Sirius's leg as Remus's foot connected, and he yelped involuntarily. Sorry, I meant to get Pete, not you. Be quiet, all of you, James snapped. We're almost there. They paused, listening through the tapestry for a moment in the corridor. Once James gave the all clear, they clambered out onto the stone hallway. The dungeons were cool, dimly lit, and cavernous. Sirius felt a chill run up his spine. He tried to imagine coming down to these bleak corridors every night, living down here, and he felt a rush of gratitude for the cosy Gryffindor common room. Where's the entrance? He murmured. Behind the wall, Remus answered immediately, pointing. The rest of them looked over. Sirius expected to see some sign, a funny torch or a portrait, or even a stone that looked different from the rest. But it was just a plain wall, the same as the others surrounding them. How'd you know? There was a brief pause. Then Remus said hurriedly, I've seen them go in before. He sounded nervous, though Sirius wasn't sure why. Do you know the password? Nope. Damn, it's not curfew yet. Let's just wait. Sirius hated waiting. It was too cramped underneath the cloak, and too hot. Peter kept shifting his weight from foot to foot nervously, and it was getting on Sirius's nerves. He was just about to snap at the smaller boy when 2 seventh years came hurrying through. Sirius jerked his head up at the sound of their footsteps and stifled a groan. Just my luck. Let's see the ring again, Bella, Narcissa pleaded with her elder sister. Sirius pressed himself back into the wall, wishing he was anywhere else. He barely spoken to his cousin since the sorting. If their eyes met in the dining hall, the girls only glared at him. Bellatrix preened, extending her bony fingers to show off ugly silver and emerald engagement ring, which she had been flashing around at every family gathering since the summer. At school, she had been just as annoying, making sure that everyone knew she would be marrying Rodolphus Lestrange as soon as she completed her newts. Sirius had to go to the engagement party. It was awful. Bellatrix was a bitch the entire night, and her fiancé was one of the creepiest men Sirius had ever met. He didn't even want to think about how soon he'd have to be attending their wedding. Narcissa squealed as she looked at the ring, as if she hadn't already seen it 1,000 times. Gorgeous! I can't wait to get married, she gushed. Wait your turn, Bellatrix replied, voice scratchy and haughty. Once Lucius has a better position at the ministry, I'm sure Mummy and Daddy will agree to the match. They were in front of the wall now. Bellatrix flipped her curly black hair over her shoulder. Sirius hated how similar it looked to theirs. Decades of marrying within the family had resulted in a complete lack of originality when it came to features. He cringed just thinking about the number of times people had mistaken his cousins for his sisters. "Dundas sanguine," Bellatrix announced, and the wall slid aside to let them in, and all 4 boys hurried after, as fast as possible before it closed. Sirius's stomach did a flip as he looked about the place where he was supposed to have spent his 7 years at Hogwarts. It felt strangely familiar. He recognized so much from his family's stories. There was a fireplace, decorated with onyx and jade, the candelabras flickering on the walls, a portrait of Salazar Slytherin. There was a reading alcove his mother had spoken about, where she studied as a girl. His throat felt dry. He wasn't sure how to untangle the feeling in his chest. This place didn't feel like home, and yet it did. Sirius could picture himself here, or not himself as he was, precisely, but the son his parents expected him to be, chatting with his cousins, studying spellbook where his parents had studied, and their parents before them. James prodded them forward, and Sirius realized that he'd frozen in place, completely unaware of the others behind him. He hoped they hadn't noticed. They hurried down the flight of stairs, searching for the boys' dormitories. On their way, they passed Severus, sitting alone in the corner, hunched over his potions textbook. Sirius felt a spike of resentment that slimy, disgusting little wretch like Severus had made it into Slytherin. When he— "Stop it," he told himself fiercely. "You would have been miserable here." It was true, but knowing that didn't really make him feel any better. At the top of the stairs, they entered the first door, which was, miraculously, a bedroom. James cast off the cloak, rushing into the room cast off the cloak, rushing into the room as he said, "Keep a lookout, eh, Peter?" Peter responded immediately, scurrying towards the entryway and glancing nervously over his shoulder every 5 seconds. James, catching sight of the look on Sirius's face, nudged his "For God's sake!" James, catching sight of the look on Sirius's face, nudged his shoulder and grinned mischievously. "Reckon one of these is Snape's bed," Sirius smirked, trying to shake off his dark mood. "This one might be," he pointed. Sheets look greasy enough." All 4 of them sniggered. Quick then, lads! Gloves on!" James whispered, unscrewing the jar. Remus and Sirius pulled on a dragon hide. For God's sake! Remus and Sirius pulled on a dragon hide glove each, grabbing hands of seeds and scattering them liberally underneath all the bedclothes. "They'll see them," James said, sounding disappointed. Sirius frowned, looking down at the bright red seeds like drops of blood against the white sheets. Even in the dark they stood out. "Well, they might get in on them trying to brush them out," Sirius offered. Hang on, Remus mumbled, frowning, sticking his lip out the way he did when he was thinking. He pulled his wand out, biting his lip as he waved it delicately over this bed He pulled out his wand, biting his lip, as he waved it delicately over the bed where they had just scattered the seeds. This is a spell word. Obfuscate. What? Obfuscate, he whispered. Incantation perfect. Yeah, I don't think that was perfect. The seeds disappeared completely. Sirius blinked, searching for any trace of them. But they were gone. Blimey! James stared. How did you do that? Flitwick hadn't taught us that charm yet, had he? Was it in the reading? Nah, Remus shrugged. Saw some fifth years doing it yesterday, to some sweets. Nah, Remus shrugged. I saw some fifth years doing it yesterday to some sweets they bought in the village. It's not hard to copy. Easy for Remus to say. Sirius and James immediately attempted the spell themselves over their respective seeds. Nothing happened. Sirius frowned, trying again, listening to James whisper next to him, Obfuscate! Obfuscate! After his third try, James managed to vanish all of his. Sirius hadn't done anything at all, his face flushed with shame. You'd better do it, Lupin, or we'll be here all night, James said, good-naturedly. Yes, please hurry up. Yes, please hurry up, Peter hissed from the doorway, white with fear. Sirius tried to tamp down the resentment bubbling in his chest. He gave it a few more goes, determined to get it right, but no matter what he did, he couldn't emulate the motion that Sirius made with his wand, or the incantation quite right. Finally, he gave up, leaving the task to Lupin. You're going to show me exactly how you did that once we're back on neutral territory, he said. Remus nodded, looking a bit confused. He didn't quite seem to understand why they were struggling so much. Once every bed appeared empty, James announced, Next room, pulling them back to the entranceway. Do we have to? Peter whined, hopping from foot to foot. Isn't that enough? Not even close. Sirius laughed, a bit patronizingly, tossing his head. What if we didn't even get Snape's bed yet? We have to get them all, Pete. Are you with us or not? All the boys, anyway, James said. As they entered the next bedroom. Don't fancy our chances getting into the girls. Remember what happened to Duck? Remember what happened to Duck Caswell last week? Caswell? What the hell? They made quick work of it. James and Sirius scattering the seeds while Remus cast the concealment charm. Surprisingly, they actually managed to get every single one of the boys' rooms, including the last one, which had 3 sleeping students in it. Sixth years. Even Sirius had to throw in the towel at that point, but Remus darted in by himself and returned a few later, eyes shining with mischief. By the time they had finished, it was getting late. More and more Slytherins were heading upstairs to bed. They had to creep carefully down the stairs, flattening themselves against the wall as they passed. It was slow going, but they managed to sneak all the way back to the common room unseen, darting back into the corridor outside. Per James's instructions, they all kept quiet as possible until they were in spitting distance of the Gryffindor Tower. Per James's instructions, they all kept as quiet as possible until they were in spitting distance of the Gryffindor Tower. When it was finally safe to remove the cloak once more. Widdershins! They chanted together at the fat lady who swung open for them. Inside, the Gryffindor common room was warm and cozy, and Sirius felt a strange calmness settle in his chest. This was his home. He threw himself onto the nearest available sofa with his friends, cheeks aching from smiling so hard. Frank Longbottom called to them from his desk, where he was tidying up his revision notes. "Cutting it fine, lad. Interesting." Peter's eyes widened in a moment of panic, but James just waved a hand and said, "Library, obviously." Frank, though he was smiling. "I'm sure I'll hear about it soon enough." I wish I could be there when it kicks off," Sirius whispered, giddy with adrenaline. And I wish even more that we could have gotten my cousins. This is just the beginning, Sirius," James replied, slapping his knee. "Between the four of us, I reckon we could go even excellent first mission, men." Peter whimpered, "First mission?" My Shayla.